Hey, how's it going? My name is Jeff and I'm a licensed occupational therapist. So I just noticed this video on my feed. The wife looks like she's having a good time. She's smiling. Honestly, I think the dad looks really annoyed. Like, he just looks like he's not having a good time. Like, there's a freeze frame here from here. You'll see, like, he kind of looks like he's smiling, but the rest of the way, honestly, it looks like he's not having a good time. He's like, yeah, okay. He kind of smiles during the handoff. Doesn't look like he's having a good time. Well, people are all kind of like laughing at him, and then he realizes what's going on, and he's like, yeah, okay, haha, yeah, to whatever the audience member. Notice that this guy's name was mentioned, and like now he's like made viral, basically, and whether good or bad. So I thought it'd be interesting to see what the public commentary was. And so first of all, the creator, who probably made this guy like give him a lot of views, right? I was interviewed by the Today Show. Yeah, that's how I found the article, as well as a couple on the video. I will be hanging out with a couple next week. So this is really cool. Like social media, bringing people together in like kind of really random situations, and like these people's lives are kind of changed for this moment in time. Maybe they're 15 minutes of fame, right? He doesn't even look mad, to be honest. Like, what else is he supposed to do? Face the crowd and applaud with them? So it looks like some people say that he does look mad, which I actually agree with. Mime out there just doing the Lord's work. So, Ashley, so I want you to think about this also from a male versus female gender kind of role expectation perspective. So this is a female saying this, so she agrees with the mime. And then this is interesting. Oh, they fought in the minivan after this. Maybe, and I actually think this is actually very likely. That's my brother and sister-in-law. They did not argue, both found it funny. So many others would have been fighting in the minivan. It's sad. Is it sad though? Like that they'd be fighting over it? I think it's actually an issue that should be raised. And it's like, I don't think it's sad, so to speak, that they're actually fighting. Just fighting is an emotional reaction. It's how people respond. But the broader thing is that they're addressing a issue in their marriage. So I don't think that's sad, right? Otherwise, if they don't address it and they just keep it silent, then one of the dad may be kind of like brewing the whole time. I think overall, the overall reaction is they think it's funny. Probably a lot of this is females finding it funny, but I'd be interested in like looking at the statistics, like doing like an analysis of this actual data. And, a lot of guys probably make fun of him probably because they feel like, oh yeah, like you should be doing this and carrying the load. And those of you guys who don't get this, and I should address this probably because there's a cultural aspect to this, and probably, I don't know where this was filmed, but Western, right? So it's important to address culture too. And I didn't even think about this. Like, you don't know the culture of this couple. Like, what if it's the culture for the women to carry the load? Meanwhile, in the background, like the dad is doing all the other types of heavy lifting. Like, you don't know that. And so what's going on in this video, just from a cultural perspective, if you don't understand why this is funny, probably because you're not from this culture, is there is a couple and they look like a family, and the mom is doing all the heavy lifting, right? So basically there's a role expectation. Traditionally, like evolutionarily, women take care of the babies, right? And they do the child rearing, but guys should be doing the heavy lifting. So probably what this mime is kind of like trying to make a commentary or a joke about is that the dad should be, first of all, he probably thinks the dad is being lazy. He's in the back. He's not doing anything, not carrying anything, being kind of lazy, and he should be carrying the bag. So that's why he hands the bag to him and, hey, do what you're supposed to. Like, your wife is like, look, she's working so hard and she's doing all this. And meanwhile, you're being lazy in the back, right? And then this one I thought was interesting. I love all these comments not knowing the context. The context. We don't know the context. And that's going to be one of the points that I make. And this is also another good comment. Honestly, dude is probably an amazing, hardworking, supportive father and husband who had a moment where he didn't think about it. And Dom said, this was a guy, I wish there were more people saying this, because the wife commented here clarifying the video. clarifying. Oh, actually, the wife commented here, clarifying the video. She said pretty much what you just said. Oh, wow. What you just said, which was, honestly, dude is probably an amazing, hardworking, supportive father. See? So I gave the guy the benefit of the doubt. When I say the guy, the dad. And he was probably a supportive father. And just in this one moment, this few seconds, it looks like he's not doing anything. So this gets to the main point about this video and kind of why I was motivated to make this, because I made a post on this on social media first. A few words I made in the caption was, this totally could have happened to me. So why do I say this totally could have happened to me? So here's my real live story. For those of you who are new to my content, I'm an occupational therapist who has had I had an accident a couple of years ago, and it resulted in me having a lower back injury. And during like the very initial recovery period, even to this day, my wife did a lot of the heavy lifting. Like, we had a baby and a newborn. So this happened around the same time that my son was born, actually right before it. So two of the worst things that could happen, me having a physical disability, and I would argue a mental condition that, you know, was associated with it, like depression. And then a newborn son, where it's like a lot of contrasting emotions too, right? Like happiness and joy, right? Having a newborn, my first newborn. But meanwhile, me not being able to fulfill that role. Fast forward a couple months, my baby got bigger. We put him in the stroller. My wife did the loading and unloading of the stroller. She did all the heavy lifting. I just sat in the back with the baby, like role reversal for gender, like gender role reversal, what my wife would have been doing. So instead, she was driving, I was in the back. She loaded up the shopping cart and did all the lifting and stuff and unloading of stuff. I kind of watched the baby. So when I say this could have easily happened to me, like, look, I'm not gonna like not live my life and be stuck in the room all day. I would want to, and you guys all out there with physical or mental health issues, should you live your life too. Like, I could have easily ended up living my life and haven't been this situation and be this Nick guy and been made fun of by this Mime. And if this happened to me on the spot there, I definitely wouldn't have laughed, and I would have called the Mime out. Like, actually, she's doing all this lifting because I have a back injury and I can't do this. So I don't think this is funny at all. What do you guys think if you were in that situation? And so even to this day, I don't lift my full 100% like that I did before my injury. I still kind of like watch it and do what I can do to my maximum potential, but I also don't reach that point where I may have a flare up in my pain, because that, you know, puts me back down to not doing as much. Even in the back of my mind, like to this day, even before this video, I found out about it. When I'm in public and my wife is doing more of the heavy lifting, I'm like in the back of my mind, it's like, oh God, I'm having anxiety about it. Like there's going to be one day where someone comes up and be like, hey, like, why are you so lazy? Or like, why are you not helping your wife out or whatever? And meanwhile, what you guys don't know is my wife is working, but I'm taking care of my kid. Like, I'm doing all of the traditional women's like caretaking role. Like, I'm like taking him to go grocery shopping. I'm taking him to the park. And during nighttime, like when my wife gets off work and is like sleeping with my kid, I'm like doing work like for like OTDUDE. Like, so same kind of story probably basically as this guy. It's like this guy's a supportive father, and just like it just is portrayed in this clip that he's not doing as much. But at what cost? What if it affected his mental health? Like, poor guy, his like full name is like on the internet now and viewed by like millions of people, Nick Tazensky. And he's, you know, like the quote was, that Mime totally caught me off guard. At that moment, I was in a total daze. I was really hungry and my feet were hurting me. So it looks like he's kind of giving an explanation for the story, which is probably what happened. He was hungry and his feet were hurting him. And we don't know what happened like moments leading up to this before they like entered this stadium. Like, he could have, you know, like offered to hold the bag, and the wife could have like not let him. Well, we don't know. And he said, I thought it was pretty funny. He said, maybe in the interview he said this, and I'm not going to get into the psychology because I don't know his psychology and like, I'm not going to make assumptions, but I don't think he like really thought it was funny in that moment, even though he said it in this interview. And a lot of people probably agreed, like in the comments, that he looked like he was kind of like upset or angry or embarrassed or whatever. All these emotions hitting you at the same time. Getting back to like I feel for this guy, and like the jokes like on him, and it could be like on him for a long time. Like poor guy, like his name is like now on the internet. All his friends are gonna like make fun of him. His family's gonna make fun of him, and he's gonna be like, ha ha, yeah, yeah, yeah. Meanwhile, like, how is this affecting him and like his mental health? Like, he's being made fun of for something that's not true. And like, you could think it's probably funny at a time, but like, how is this going to affect his relationship with his wife and like his own mental health, right? So I think this is a very interesting commentary and very something that one main message I want you guys all to think about is not to judge people and pass judgment or jump to conclusions based on something you notice in public or whatever, if you don't know this person's story. And even if you do know this couple's story and all the background behind what's going on, how they're behaving, like still like just you shouldn't pass judgment because it can lead to things like stigma. I think the big thing is stigma here. And one thing I wanted to point out was one of the comments that I thought was very interesting on my Instagram was someone replied that, yeah, it looks like this guy is like a mime who does this and he's regularly doing this and he brings laughter to a lot of like people like in the audiences over the years. And then similarly, how like comedians and talk show hosts put people on the spot like politicians and it brings laughter to millions is what this commenter said. So this made me think about comedians, right? And like when they make jokes and skits, it is often at the expense of one group or party, right? Like it could be like, if it's like a racial joke, blacks versus whites or whatever. So one group is always going to be like stigmatized or stereotyped or laughed at or made fun of at the end of the day, like in these types of jokes. So does that make it okay because they're comedians? I forgot which comedian it was, but I think it was on like with Seinfeld, like on him catching coffee with comedians. One of the comedians, maybe Seinfeld made a good point that comedians put a lot on the line to be vulnerable at the expense of entertainment, making people laugh. And, you know, comedians have been doing this like for however long, but is that okay? Like, I know this is a very controversial issue. Is it okay for comedians to make fun of certain groups at the other group's expense, even if it's like very controversial and not right and maybe racist? So I want to bring up a story about my wife recently attending a show, a comedy show, in which the audience was predominantly white. At one point, one of the jokes or the skits was like about this. I don't find this funny at all, honestly, about a midget slave owner. And the audience, most of them probably thought it was hilarious. Well, audience being white, right? So white, potentially, they probably would think it's funny because in America, a lot of slave owners, well, I think all of them really were, predominantly, or all of them were white. What if this audience was black? They probably wouldn't find it funny. They probably would have booed this guy off the stage. And my wife was like really uncomfortable this whole time about this comedian. And at another point in the show, there was a black comedian that came on stage and my wife overheard some guests in the audience who were white say, "Oh yeah, I bet this guy's from Oakland, ha ha ha." Like, and that also made my wife really uncomfortable. So hearing this is like, well, I'm glad I didn't go to the show. You know what I did, by the way, when my wife went to this comedy show? I was watching my kid. Okay. I was watching my son. Okay. This makes me like not want to go to comedy shows anymore. They're going to make fun of some groups and like I'm thinking about it in the big picture. Like if I went to like an Allie, what's that girl's name? Allie, whatever girl, that Asian girl who makes a lot of jokes about, well, actually her jokes aren't, a lot of them are racist. They're actually about, if you think about it, wow, this is really big. Like she also makes fun of, I think a lot of her jokes are about her husband too. And how it kind of like minimizes him. And if you don't know, I think, look, they got a divorce. It's kind of wild. Ali Wong and husband Justin Hakuda divorced after 8 years of marriage. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm gonna, you know, kind of preach what I'm kind of saying is I'm not gonna pass judgment and assume because I don't know what happened in Ali and her husband's marriage. And even if I did know, like they have their own reasons for it, and it sucks because I think they have kids, and this is a whole nother thing. But you know, divorce is a tough thing for the kids. But look, like the husband and wife, and they're no longer together. So could these all these jokes that Allie had made over these years affected like their marriage? They're gonna make fun of this guy and like at his expense. This creates stigma and stereotypes. Not creates, potentially creates them. Like society keeps evolving and languages keep evolving and our cultures and norms keep evolving and changing. But it perpetuates it. It makes the audience think that it's okay. So for my wife who went to this comedy show, this audience thinks it's okay to make fun of like these things that are okay with this audience. And like that random couple that made that comment about this guy being from Oakland, like that's definitely right there, an assumption, right? And a stereotype like, oh, all black people must be from Oakland if they don't look the part, they don't look all dressed up or whatever. Like that's not okay. I'm going to defend mental health here and say that it shouldn't be okay to make fun of certain groups or assume. So the article, I really want to kind of point it out that just came out that's really interesting. Here is a Lancet article. The Lancet Commission on Ending Stigma and Discrimination in Mental Health. It is time to end all forms of stigma and discrimination against people with mental health conditions, for not just mental health, for those who's they say mental health conditions here, but they also say for like a lot of other things. It's much more broader than that. So very provocative, even coming from the Lancet, like all forms of stigma in their content. So like racism or stigma against like marginalized groups, minorities, disabilities, like people who maybe have mental health issues like schizophrenia as an example they use. If you guys all don't know, there's a mental health crisis going on here, especially that's worsened after the pandemic. The mental health system is really strained. There's a shortage of mental health professionals. People are committing suicide. Like I think every 15 minutes, someone dies by suicide. Like this is serious stuff. Like, so is all of this laughter worth it? And like social commentary, like men have to do all the heavy lifting. Like, so what? Like in my situation, I don't do the heavy lifting and my wife is the one who works. So what? With stigma, it's always this us versus him or her or them mentality. I think we all need to really be more broader thinking. And this is why I think social media has pros and cons. And a lot of the cons is it creates like these think tanks, these groups, these kind of like choirs, you know, that all think the same. And that's the danger, especially if you join certain groups. A lot of people have like group think and they'll think a certain way and that can affect your psychology and you start thinking a certain way. To really not judge people, especially in public, based on just a few seconds of how you observe their behavior. You don't know their story and you should give them the benefit of doubt. Yeah, I don't deny that there are some people who are like really lazy and whatever, but maybe they're lazy because they're in pain or maybe they're really depressed or whatever. And so what's wrong with them being lazy in those situations? Like the fact that they're out in public and doing something despite them being lazy is like, I would argue like a big step. Instead of them being at home all day and like in bed or like contemplating suicide. You know, we don't talk about suicide enough, I think, these days, and we should be. It's been like this kind of taboo topic, but people are dying. And like, I know I sound like I'm being extreme, like this guy's not going to commit suicide, whatever, but what if it was someone else who had poor mental health and they took a huge step to get out of the house and like, okay, like husband, like the wife goes, okay, let's just all go out one day because you've been home for like months after this injury or whatever, and you've had poor mental health. It's just good to get the kids out and I'll do all the work. You just enjoy yourself. And this could have very well been the situation. And then this happens to this guy he's made fun of. And then it's like, do you think this guy's ever going to go out in the world again? Like after being like humiliated really basically in public, and now his friends and family may potentially make fun of him. Like this poor person, hypothetically anyways, now has like really poor mental health and they may contemplate suicide like very well. So think about that. When you pass judgment and when we like perpetuate the stigma and these stereotypes, it's like not okay. And we all need to really take a step to stop. And it all starts with you. Like you may think you're like, you know, whatever, you're not doing it, but, and I'm sure most of you guys aren't, like you aren't racist, whatever, but just really like think big picture and really question your thinking and your assumptions and your values. because you may very well be passing judgment before you know it. So that's my homework for all you guys, just as much as I am doing it when I may, we're all human, like we all learn and make mistakes and stuff. But whenever I do accidentally pass judgment, I kind of step back and go, actually, maybe not. Like, I'm going to give this person the benefit of the doubt. And especially, and that's just like, in public, when you're in passing and you're just like, okay, just a moment, random thing in life. But things like real life interactions in the workplace, in education, in volunteering, where there is interaction with certain other people, even you shouldn't pass judgment in those cases either, and even if you do know their story, like, so what? Put yourself in their shoes. Like, what if you were this person? Like, you may be very well behaving this way too, right? So I think it's a good message in terms of mental health. And I don't have the answer, but I think that this Lancet article is a really good step in the right direction in towards advocating for people, especially mental health, and ending stigma. I know it'll never end, but we can, because, humans will, new people will be born, and I know there's good eggs and bad eggs, but I think overall the majority and like efforts should be made towards ending stigma and discrimination, especially in mental health. Now's the time, because we have the tools like social media where we can reach millions and be viral and stuff. So thank you all for watching. Have a nice day. And what do you think? Let me know in the comments.